We're going to get started in probably 10 minutes. Just as people virtual is going to be 10 minutes set up. We plan on starting at 7:40. So just to let you all know, I'm saying for coming.
That's all. That's great. Thank you.
Someone's better organized than I am. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
I should have lost one up there.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that level of heavy. I do like that. Thank you.
I didn't know how passive aggressive I was feeling on it.
You know what? Is there ever like too much passive aggressiveness? I don't know.
I don't know. We have
Oh my god, that amazing breeze from there. Thank
yeah,
you.
there's a nice breeze.
Yeah, this is perfect. Thank
This
you.
is, yes, thank you.
Rolling. Sure.
Thank you.
You want some or?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you so much.
We get a table now. Hi, Kate.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
So you guys don't have to pick up the microphones. It'll pick
Okay,
you up. So you don't have to worry about that. And you don't need to lean in either.
He'll grab it all.
Thanks so much.
Camera, I don't want to spill the water.
I don't want to hold you all up on this gorgeous spring summer evening, so we'll get started a few minutes in advance, seeing that all of our board candidates are here. I'll let Alan take over to introduce them, but I want to thank you first for all coming this evening. It's important to participate in our democracy. They said about 9% of people who can vote voted in the advance polls, so that leaves the other 91% of you vote on Thursday. And this is one of the polling locations, but check your voter ID card. I forgot mine and voted in the advance polls, and there's no problem. I'm going to go with your ID and you'll be fine. Secondly, we want to also thank the Worship Community Center 55 and Beach Metro. I want to call out Metro because they won't do it for themselves, but they play a huge role in our community, as you know, especially these days with local news becoming less popular. Thank you. We have journalists like Alan who also cover it for us with local news. So I encourage you to support local news, whether it be the Beach Metro or local news where Alan works. Alan's a great member of the community and he's been doing this for a number of years for us, and we really appreciate it. And you can watch him every weeknight. You can watch him on Focus on Chorus. We've got you doing everything. And I saw he's on the radio with his lunch show. So you can spend your entire day with Alan after spending the next hour and a half. We're going to end at 9 p.m. promptly, so the church can close up and everyone can go home. So thank you again for attending. We've got a live stream going as well, so if you missed something and want to watch it, we'll be on YouTube after and live right now. And have a great evening, and please remember we're in a sanctuary. Thanks to Kingston Road United, so be on your best behavior as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for that kind introduction, and thank you again to Beach Metro and to Balmy Beach Residents Association and to Center 55 for putting this on and for once again asking me to participate. It is an honor to be here and to be part of this democratic process, and thank you to you for coming. And also thank you to our candidates. You know, in our society, we like to take a lot of pot shots at our politicians and those that run for public office, but I can tell you firsthand from working at Queen's Park, it is a hard job. And that's when you make it to government, even to put your name on a ballot, to put your name on a sign, to go knock on doors and put yourself out there. That is an incredible thing. So thank you to all of our candidates for doing that. Thank you to all of you. My name is Alan Connor. I co-anchor the evening news here in Toronto on Global between 5:30 and 6:30. And as John so kindly mentioned, I also host Focus Ontario, and I have a radio program as well. And I love to talk about provincial politics. I'm a bit of a nerd. I hope that you are kind of as well. Maybe that's why you're here. You're interested in this community. I'm part of this community as well. And I think we're going to have a great conversation this evening with an opportunity to get to know our candidates a little bit better and get to know where they stand on issues that are important to you. So over the course of the evening, we're just going to have a free and open discussion. I'm going to allow the candidates to introduce themselves. Then I'm going to ask a couple of questions. There's been a couple of other series of questions submitted to the Beach Metro, and some of them are just great. I wish you wrote questions for me and for my broadcast for this week as well, because I could use it. Some of these are good. I'm going to steal your ideas and take them, and I'm probably not going to even give you credit, because that's just the way I roll. But thank you again for all the questions that came in. So let's begin with an introduction from our candidates, and we have with us tonight the Liberal candidate, Mary Margaret McMahon, Kate Dupuy with the NDP, Abhijit Mane with the Green Party, and with the New Blue, Stephen Roan. Not with us this evening is Angela Kennedy from the Progressive Conservatives. But let's just begin at this side of the table and work our way down. Just introduce yourselves to the congregation, I guess I could call it that, considering where we are. We'll begin with Kate. You can go ahead, please.
Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight, and thank you to the organizers for the invitation to attend. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to speak with our Beaches East York community. My husband and I have lived in the riding for 12 years. We moved here when I was doing my PhD, and we love living in Beaches East York and raising our family in this close-knit community. I am a clinical neuropsychologist, a professor at Sheridan College, and a parent. During the COVID-19 pandemic, when I saw very clearly that the Ford government, who is not represented here tonight, had no plan to protect children in our schools, I came together with a group of parents to start a rapid testing program. What started small with me setting up a table very similar to this one across the street from my school and trying to sign parents up after drop-off turned into a huge movement, with almost 300 children at my child's school signed up and over 20 schools across Ontario joining the program. Together, we tested hundreds of kids twice a week for months and months. We partnered with Michael Garron Hospital to work with the team there to set up a reporting website so that families in Beaches East York could help protect their kids and their community. Although we were ultimately shut down by Doug Ford, we didn't let that stop us. We created a successful pressure campaign. We courted media attention. We gathered signatures on our petition. We even worked with NDP MPP Rima Burns-McGowan to have our petition read at Queen's Park. I wrote an op-ed in the Toronto Star as well, with 2 physicians. Eventually, after months of fighting, Doug Ford finally allowed Ontarians to access rapid tests. And I'm so proud of the work that we did in Beaches East York to help keep our community safe. I decided to run for office because we need to ensure that during the next 4 years, our community will once again be represented by a strong, progressive voice, by someone who is not afraid to stand up to Doug Ford, by someone who will fight for our public education and our public healthcare systems. I am ready to advocate for the needs of our community at Queen's Park. I've been knocking on so many doors in Beaches East York, and I've heard your concerns. People are worried about how expensive life is getting. They're worried about the high cost of housing. They're worried about our climate crisis and a ridiculous plan to spend billions of dollars on highways. They're worries that the government will privatize our healthcare system and our education system, and worries that the needs of seniors in our community have been absolutely forgotten. I am running for the NDP because I have seen firsthand the devastation that decades of cuts under both a Liberal and a PC government have had to the healthcare, education, and long-term care sectors here in Ontario. Being a full-time working parent of 2 little kids during the pandemic, I know I can handle hard work and long hours that will be involved in representing you here in our beautiful riding. So on June 2nd, I ask that you vote for strong leadership. You vote for a more affordable life. Vote for strong and determined local advocacy. Vote for Kate Dupuy. I'm ready. I look forward to tonight's discussion with my colleagues here, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Sorry? I'd rather not, only because it is an indoor setting and I have at-risk people I live with. So if that's okay with everyone, can you hear me? Okay, sure, that'd be great. There we go. Thank you. Does that help?
Yeah, that's
Okay, perfect. So my name is Abhijit. I'm the deputy leader of the Ontario Green Party and your provincial candidate here. And I came in wearing a suit, but I just took it off, and that's not because I'm trying to be folksy. It's just because it's sweltering in May. And I really think that, you know, I joined this party because this party stands for people first. Our slogan literally is people-powered change. And so I want to tell you a little story about how I became the deputy leader and your candidate. I came to Canada in about 2005 from Mumbai, India. That's where I was born and raised. And I first arrived here on the Danforth, lived in a small basement apartment with other fellow immigrants and with my folks as well who were there. And afterwards, I went to Danforth Tech for high school, and then I did my master's at U of T and my undergrad at McMaster. And currently, I work at a nonprofit that works with folks with developmental disabilities like autism and Down syndrome. And so I'm an instructional designer. I design courses and teach folks who support people with DD. And I mean, the reason I joined politics was largely driven by my passions in education and also my roots in India. My grandfather was a member of parliament in India who was one of the first MPs of independent India after independence from the British Empire. And he was a strong advocate not just for fight against colonialism, but also for social justice, as well as the urban poor and the so-called low castes in India. And so, but all of his accomplishments I unfortunately only learned about after he passed away from his well-wishers and supporters, because he belonged to that generation, I suppose, that didn't talk about their accomplishments and did politics for the sake of public service before public glory. And that really inspired me to look at politics as a way to affect change within society. And I saw a real-world example that did that. And so when I joined, when I saw Mike Schreiner at an interview that he was doing where he was talking about this piece of legislation that he was helping pass through, but he couldn't take any credit for it because that's the only way that it was going to pass, he said, that's fine. As long as it helps Ontario and the people of Ontario, that's what matters more. And I made a direct connection between my grandfather and Mike, and that told me that there's another person here in Ontario politics who puts public service before public glory. And that's why I thought that's my guy. And so I joined the Ontario Greens. I became deputy leader in 2018. I'm also the co-chair of our platform committee, so much of our platform was designed under our collective guidance of me and my friend Stacey Dankert, who was my co-chair. And you know, I really appreciate all the things that Mike Schreiner brings to the table. I'm sure all of you saw the leaders' debates and how well Mike did. And under his tutelage, I think I've learned quite a bit about what politics should be. It should be about collaboration and cooperation rather than hyper-partisanship. It should be about how can we work together for the betterment of all Ontarians. And I hope we use that spirit and further politics here in Beaches East York as well. And I also just want to appreciate everyone for coming out here. This is an important thing to do, being engaged in civic politics, and keeping your candidates to account is important. So thank you for being here. And also I want to thank my fellow candidates for showing up. It's unfortunate that one of them didn't. It really is disrespectful to all of our citizenry when we don't show up, because politics and decisions are made by those who show up. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's see if this works. I don't know if it's on. Maybe I'll just hold it. Is that better? Except it's caught under, if John Cameron's around, it's caught. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming, giving up your free time to be here. And thank you to the hosts for having us and my fellow candidate colleagues for stepping up Tough, but a brave and important thing to do. My name is Mary Margaret McMahon, and I'm running to be your next member of Provincial Parliament for Beaches East York. Growing up in a small town with parents who dragged me and my 3 brothers out volunteering every chance they could, taught me a lot. I saw firsthand the huge benefits in giving back to your community. It's the more you give, the better you feel. And so as, sorry, I'm just mixed up for a sec. And that realization has followed me my whole life and become somewhat of a mantra, trying to make the world a better place for the greater good. When my kids were small, I volunteered every day at their school. I started a residents association, a farmers market, environmental groups. In the pandemic, I volunteered at COVID clinics right across the GTA. And currently, I'm trying to help build a hospice in the East End, a lifelong dream to honor my mother. I don't like to sit still. As your Toronto City Councillor for Beautiful Beaches East York, in 2010 to 2018, I focused on getting things done. Less talk, more action. Although I do like to talk, if you know me. I spearheaded the Laneway Suites housing policy, a game-changing planning policy that actually will help address, it won't solve, but it will help address the housing crisis. Transform TO, the city's first ever climate adaptation and mitigation plan, was a crusade of mine. I worked tirelessly to get a unanimous vote at council, a rare feat. And in fact, that is why I'm jumping back into public service, is to try and help continue to tackle the climate emergency. I'm running for the Ontario Liberal Party under Stephen Del Duca because we have serious issues to be addressed. And we need a party with candidates who actually care about doing the right thing and have a plan to get it done. From revolutionary elder care to bold climate action, I will help deliver the Ontario Liberal platform with the energy I am known for. June 2nd, 2022, vote Triple M, Mary Margaret McMahon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And representing the New Blue Party tonight, Stephen Roney.
Hi, I'm Steve Roney. I'm your New Blue candidate. If you were here, I would have begun by congratulating our local Conservative candidate. According to the polls, Doug Ford has this election all sewn up. So it's all over. We can go home. What's the point, right? Well, there is a point. There is still a point. There's actually been very little movement in the polls during this campaign, and that's a bad sign. That suggests nobody's excited about this election. Nobody's interested. Nobody's thinking if nobody's changing their mind. This is strange because, as you might have noticed, we're living in very interesting times. A lot of unprecedented things have happened in the past 2 or 3 years. There are a lot of things we need to discuss, and we're not discussing them. So nobody is interested in this election, I think, because everybody is saying the same thing and not speaking about a lot of things, and everybody differs only on who will get it done. Voters are not being given a choice. Vote against that. Vote against being denied a choice. All 4 other parties are bunched up in an ideological corner. The PC party is not conservative. Doug Ford agrees on everything with Justin Trudeau. The Liberal Party is not liberal. Liberal used to have something to do with liberty. The NDP no longer cares about the working class. Truckers appear in Ottawa, and the NDP sees them as an occupying force. The Green Party cares about the environment. So does everyone. There's no big fan base for pollution. All four establishment parties have a new idol, sometimes called critical theory, postmodernism, or cultural Marxism. There are other names. There are other strains of this. All the other parties voted for Bill 67 at second reading, and Bill 67 would impose critical theory in our schools at every level. That's why I'm here. Critical theory is what is behind all you hear these days about pulling down statues, renaming universities, calling Canada racist, and trying to limit discussion and prevent choice. It is why we now seem to have so few choices when we vote. Critical theory makes three claims, boiling it down to the essentials, three essential claims. First, that race is essential to your identity. Second, that there is no objective reality. Third, that all social relations are about power. Believing that race is essential is racism. Believing there is no objective reality is insanity. Believing that all social interactions are about power ends in a war of all against all to the last one standing, and that will be whoever is most ruthless and most powerful. And if there is no truth, the only way to deal with someone who disagrees with you is to silence them. This is the time for a protest vote. To get their attention at Queen's Park and in the media, let's get the issues back on the table. New Blue, June 2nd. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, candidates. Appreciate that. I'm going to start with a couple of questions about something that I think is very much top of mind in this election, and that is affordability. All of us are struggling or being able to try and adapt to the new reality of just what things cost. I wonder if I can get a show of hands here. How many people own a home? How many people are homeowners here? Okay. Well, as you know, house affordability is a major issue, not just in the country, in the province, but in this riding itself. I'm fortunate enough to own a home in this neighborhood, and so many of us who are homeowners, we have perhaps a different sort of take on things than those that are trying to get into the market. For seniors, especially for people who have owned their homes for a long time, they have a lot of value tied up in their homes. So my question for our candidates is your party's specific housing plan. How would your party both protect the investments of homeowners who already have their homes and have an enormous amount of equity tied up and don't want to see that go down, and at the same time balance the ability of young people to get into the housing market at the same time? Those are two tall orders. How do you do it? We'll start again on the other end of the table and come back. Steve, to you first.
Okay. The essential problem with the housing crisis is supply. It is not demand. We can tinker with demand, but the problem is supply. We've been tinkering for. When did I came to Toronto 40 years ago, and there was a housing crisis. There's still a housing crisis. It's only gotten worse. So rent controls don't work because they reduce supply. Giving tax breaks and advantage for people to save for home don't work because they're doing nothing for supply. They're only increasing demand. So more people chasing a smaller supply. We have to work on supply, and the way to do that is deregulation. Deregulation. Zoning has been a nightmare throughout its history. That's why we have these spaghetti roads and these sprawling suburbs eating up green space. This is why you get the Stalinist sameness in Eastern Europe, where every building looks the same as the next building for miles. Okay? If we cut away red tape, then the builders, public or private, can build what the people need, what the market needs. Now, people who already own the home are thinking, oh my goodness, if we deregulate, the value of my property may go down. Well, it doesn't work that way, because if you're allowed to use the highest and best use of the real estate sitting there, the value of real estate intrinsically goes up. So everybody wins with deregulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mary Margaret?
Thank you very much. So what we need to know is that it's not just going to be one tool in the toolbox that solves this. We're going to need everything, and just a plethora of options. And so my track record at City Hall, I helped to spearhead the Laneway Suites housing policy, and it's now as of right across the city so that you can pop up your garage and have someone live there. It's rental, and you could move out back, or you could stay in your house, but it's a great way for people to age in place, stay in their communities, and add to the rental stock. It's not it's not going to solve the crisis, but it's going to be one of those tools. And now next, what we've worked on as phase 2 was the garden suites plan. So, and I also worked on the inclusionary zoning, allowing for a percentage of new buildings to be affordable. The Ontario Liberal platform is costed, it's fully costed and fully modeled. So that it's not just pie in the sky ideas, I actually know where the funding is going to. And so we are planned to double the pace of home building in the next 10 years to 1.5 million homes, create an Ontario home building corporation. Back in the day, the province used to build housing and affordable housing. We need to do that again. We need to unlock provincial lands that we have sitting vacant and build housing on them. We have people dying on our streets, and we need to actually take this seriously and do something about it. And as you know, I am a doer, I'm an action girl. We're also proposing 138,000 new deeply affordable homes. And we are also, if you, maybe in your neighborhoods, you have seen an empty, vacant home. And we are we are going to tax those homes to get people to either use them to move in or to sell them. There's a home in my neighborhood that's been empty for 30 years, a 4-bedroom home. That shouldn't happen when we're in a housing crisis. In a great city like Toronto, we should be addressing those needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Monet?
Okay, so I'm 32 years old, and my generation and those younger than me can't even think about owning our own homes. It takes about $200,000 for just the down payment, which takes about 22 years on an average salary to save up. That is the state of our housing crisis right now. What we need to do is have a bold plan that sets in motion 2 things. Firstly, securing our housing, increasing our housing supply using existing stock, but also ending speculation. Housing is a human right, and it needs to be a housing first strategy, which focuses on making sure that we do implement a vacancy tax, but also a multiple home buyers tax. If you own more than 3 homes, your 3rd home will be taxed at 20% and a progressively higher tax for every single home you own afterwards, because corporations should not be owning homes, human beings should. We also need innovative solutions to back that up to increase supply, including duplexes, laneway housing, tiny homes, which can build supply within the existing stock without harming the greenbelt. And the only party that is mandating the end of blind bidding and bringing in mandatory house inspections are the Ontario Greens. We also want to focus on building 60,000 social housing units with mental health supports built in, because we also need to tackle the homelessness crisis that's raging across this province, and poverty and substance use crisis that's prevalent in our community as well. And I think one thing that people often don't talk about when it comes to housing, especially relating to our elders, is that it's true. A lot of your equity is tied into, it's your nest egg, right? The housing system and the real estate market is a huge part of Canadian equity. So we need to deal with income insecurity for our seniors as well, which is why the Ontario Greens are advocating for a universal basic income or a guaranteed livable income, which will supplement all CPP as well as old age pension, because our seniors need that help right now, and so do many people people who are marginalized and suffering through society. So what we need are holistic solutions. That's what the Green Party of Ontario recognizes, that problems are not found in silos. They're all connected to different parts of the economy and society, and therefore those solutions also need to be holistic. Thank you so much.
So like Avijit, I'm still in my 30s. I'm technically a geriatric millennial now, I think. And we bought our home in 2009. And quite honestly, we could never afford to live in our neighborhood if we were buying now, and we can probably never afford to move in our neighborhood. So we're one of those folks where your question was, how do we protect the investment of homeowners? I've been hearing this at the door, where folks are saying, you know, I bought this house, sure, in the 80s and 90s, and now I don't really have an option. Because if I were to sell my large home to move into a condo, what with land transfer tax and all of the different rental and moving fees, I probably wouldn't actually come that far out ahead, and I'd be in a smaller place. So one of the key things about our NDP platform, and one of the things that I'm so excited about as someone who specializes in the care of seniors, is our focus on home care. So we know that the vast majority of Ontarians want to remain in place and age with dignity at home. So in terms of protecting not only the investment of homeowners, but the quality of life of homeowners here in Beaches East York, we need to make sure that folks are able to be supported to remain where they want, you know, so that they can remain in their own homes. Then to the second part of the question, which was, you know, how do we then balance that? If we want people to age in place at home, that means there won't be as many homes for new people to come into. So of course, we also have a very strong plan to build new homes, but we also need to support young people who may not have, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They may not have intergenerational wealth access. So the NDP would actually support first-time home buyers to access a shared home equity loan up to 10% of their home that they could then pay back over the course of the home ownership or when they move. And so that's very important because not everyone has family, or not everyone, you know, has the ability to save up, so we can support people so that they're actually able to purchase new homes. And it's also very important for us to think of where people are buying homes. We know that people are leaving the GTA. They are leaving urban environments like Toronto to go to more smaller rural environments. And we know that during COVID, Mike Moffat, a researcher, has shown this, families of young children are leaving the GTA. And we strongly believe that people should be able to afford to live where they want to live. If my kids grow up and they want to live in Toronto, I want them to be able to live in Toronto as well. And so we need to start to tackle this now, looking forward ahead down the line, to make sure that people are able to access housing and to live where they want to live. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much to our candidates on that. My next question is also with affordability, and it is perhaps the big glowing sign that indicates to us that things are more expensive. Every time you go down the street, there it is, the gas price. And for many of us, if you're a driver, that is going to have a big impact on how much money you have at the end of the day for everything else. In the budget that was released before the campaign and not passed, so therefore it is really just a campaign document for the Progressive Conservatives, contained in that is a measure to reduce the gas tax by 5 cents a liter for 6 months beginning in July. I guess I'll go back across the table in the opposite direction, so to the NDP first. Does your party support a lowering of the gas tax, and if yes or no, why?
We know that other places in Canada have regulations on gas prices. I come from Quebec, that's one of them, Newfoundland, PEI. There are a number of places here in Canada where we're able to do this. It seems strange in Ontario, we seem to have this bizarre difficulty. We know that under the PC government, we can see this, our gas prices have only increased. Doug Ford stood in May 2018 and warned people, under an NDP or Liberal government, we'd be seeing $2 a liter gas prices, and it's $2 a liter gas prices under a PC government. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that the Ontario Energy Board is monitoring the price of gas across Ontario. We know that there are parts of the province, such as more northern and rural communities, where people really do not have access to the transit that we do here. People need to drive. So we need to make sure that we are also connecting to those folks who are living in more rural and northern parts of the province. We also want to make sure that the Ontario Energy Board monitors the price of gas across Ontario and advises on policies to reduce price volatility. So, you often hear like a friend will say, okay, gas is like 14 cents cheaper over here, and you're driving across the city to try and grab cheaper gas prices. We have to make sure that we're putting caps on these unfair price differences. We also want to make sure that we have a cap and trade revenues that are used to support communities and individuals who are disproportionately burdened from increased fuel costs. And of course, this question didn't really speak to that, but the one key thing inherent in all this is we also have to move away from our reliance of gas-powered vehicles. And so we have a very strong plan to move towards a zero-emission vehicle made in Ontario production, 100% by 2035, and very strong rebates for families who don't want to be driving a gas guzzler anymore, but maybe look at the price of zero-emission vehicles and think, oh my gosh, this is so high. We also know that here in Beaches East York, this is a problem I have at my house, we don't have anywhere to plug our cars in. I don't have a driveway. So that we would also work with the municipalities to ensure that we can retrofit homes to be able to plug in a zero-emission vehicle so that we actually don't need to rely on gas guzzlers anymore. Thank you.
So basically, lowering the gas tax is essentially a fossil fuel subsidy, right? Look where we are today. It's May, and there's a heat wave that's going through the entire province. That is not normal. And so what we actually need to focus on is exactly a complete transition to electric vehicles and funding our transit system adequately. What we advocate for is when you drive an EV, it takes about $25, right, to charge your entire car for 2 weeks, or close to sometimes three weeks. And you can use the same amount of range. Like the new cars nowadays, the Ioniq has about 450 kilometers on them, which is pretty decent. But obviously, we also need to build in an infrastructure of charging stations across the province. And the Ontario Greens are offering $10,000 rebates to make sure that you can buy your new electric car and purchase it so that you can transition to the green economy. And we have the expertise both in mining as well as manufacturing in Ontario to create a completely local supply chain of manufacturing electric cars in Ontario with Ontario jobs that will keep creating new and better green jobs across the province that are good, high-paying jobs as well, with benefits and unionized protections. So basically, that entire strategy of transitioning to the green economy has to be focused on EVs, but also focused on making sure we build livable communities where you don't have to use the car every single time you need to access the grocery store, the theater, the restaurant. You can walk there, you can bike there, you can use things that are, again, mixed neighborhoods where housing is mixed with small businesses, is mixed with our utility companies, with all sorts of different conveniences right there. A livable and a walkable community is crucial to making sure that we create a community that is not entirely reliant on cars. And so when we go to Europe, when we go to Montreal, why do we like those places so much? Because you can use transit to go to any place, because you can use your bicycle or your own 2 feet to travel to places. And that's the kind of community that we want to create here in Ontario. And so housing, transit, and EVs need to be the focus of making sure that we make people's lives affordable. And we recognize that seems like lecturing from high on top about the crisis is happening right now, which is why we're advocating for building, for making sure that people have access to income supports. Like if you are an ODSP, we're the first party that announced that we will double ODSP so that you can have access to the livable and a dignified life that every single Ontarian deserves. And that's how we're going to be introducing the universal basic income. But ODSP doubling now needs to happen so that people have the necessary funding and the resources to be able to live a dignified life in Ontario. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So yes, the Ontario Liberal Party, we do support lowering the gas tax. And we need to balance that with our current climate emergency. So we need to look at all modes of transportation. And so we want to reverse the forward conservative selling off of our railways. We need to invest in regional rail like we used to have, so that someone doesn't have to drive from Guelph or London into Toronto, and make it easier by providing people with affordable, reliable options. And we've recently proposed the $1 a transit ride, and that is just, right now, we are operating the transit with under 50% capacity. Because of the pandemic, people have kind of lost the muscle memory of taking transit, and they're fearful because of COVID. And so we are trying to incentivize people to get back on transit, both from an economic point of view, but also from a sustainability point of view. So we're also looking at closing the gaps in the transit networks in every region in Toronto, so that there are viable transit options in Northern Ontario. We can't just expect to address Northern Ontario with a City of Toronto kind of lens. And then for electric vehicles, we're proposing $9,500 in rebates for the vehicles, which includes money towards a charging station, which also needs to be addressed because we know how difficult it is in this neighborhood to get parking pads, which you're going to need something similar to that to charge your electric vehicle. We'd like to lead the electric battery manufacturing in North America and launch a dedicated fund for the next generation of electric batteries, which is a great job creation, sustainable job creations. We're creating zero emission mandates for medium and heavy duty vehicles like shipping trucks. We see all those trucks on the road, so let's at least have them as green trucks. Electrifying transit, the GO trains, public transit, and school buses. So, again, addressing the climate crisis while we're addressing affordability, and many other things that are in our platform, but all with a lens on affordability and sustainability. Thank you.
New Blue has no specific plans to reduce the gas tax, basically for the reasons that our Green candidate mentioned. The general problem is inflation, but we don't want to subsidize gasoline specifically for environmental reasons. So let's talk about inflation, the more general problem, instead of details. Inflation is too much money chasing too few goods. We can't do too much about, the provincial level, about too much money. It's the federals who are just printing money. We don't get to print money in the province. We can do something about the supply of goods. We've had a problem with the supply chain across the board. We have a problem with labor because everything's been locked down and shut down. Okay, we've got to end the lockdowns and shutdowns. And the problem should correct itself, although not immediately, if we can just do that. We've got to end all of the mandates. They've reduced the labor force, they've killed our supply chain and forced prices up. No surprise. The worst possible mandate probably is the mandates against truckers, for heaven's sakes. In the middle of a supply chain crisis, the government started pulling truckers off the road, and it wasn't just the federal government. Doug Ford and the Provincial Conservatives have Bill 100 which gives them the right to suspend licenses at any time, basically at a police officer's discretion. Why would you go into the business of trucking under that situation? Okay, so end all mandates is top of the priorities for New Blue, and that's the best way to attack inflation. Also, we would cut the harmonized sales tax to 10% to compensate to some extent. It's not going to make up the whole thing, but it'll help. And in general, cutting regulations to get things going faster again, to get production up quickly. Okay? We'll also kill the industrial carbon tax, because whatever else it does, it raises the price of everything. Okay? Thank you very much. You may applaud. Come on, guys.
Thank you. Thank you to our candidates for those answers on both homes and housing costs and also gas costs. From some questions that were submitted to the Beach Metro from Peter French, asked a number of really great questions. The one I will pose to our candidates, and we'll start with you, Stephen, and come back across the table, is, and this is something that I've been working on as I prepare for the election night results on Thursday, is we begin to look at vote splits. Specifically, how will things break down, especially amongst progressive voters, and if one vote goes one way, one goes the other way, is it possible that a third candidate can come up the middle and with not too many votes, actually win? So the question is on electoral reform. And specifically, you yourself, candidates, if you are elected to Queen's Park, and obviously you have to worry about your own party, but where do you personally stand on changing from first past the post to proportional representation? We'll go to the New Blue, please.
I can't hear myself. Can you hear me? Okay, good. I'm against it. I'm against proportional representation. It's tinkering. The Westminster system works well. It might not be ideal, but you don't want to tinker with these things. You see in Europe, where you have proportional representation, it's hard to get a stable government. It's always coalition, and the problem with coalitions is they mean horse trading and special interests. The power of special interests are increased because they can. You have to cut deals to get anything done and hold your nose. So I think the Westminster system is fine. We do have a serious problem, though, because the Westminster system has been subverted in Canada. If you ever watch the debates in the original Westminster British Parliament, and you watch the debates in any of the houses in Canada, it's night and day, because they actually debate things there, and they actually have votes where the individual members decide. Whereas in our parliaments here, we're just parrots, we're just puppets. The problem is that the leaders of our parties get to choose the candidates. In the Westminster system, the members are supposed to choose the leader. We've got it reversed, and as a result, we have no real. What we have is an elected dictatorship in most of our legislatures in Canada. That's what I want to change. That's not tinkering. Proportional representation, there are pluses and minuses, but it's not an obvious advantage. Thank you.
Thank you. When I was at City Hall, I supported the concept of ranked ballots and other areas of electoral reform. It's very important to inspire people to vote. I'm hearing at the door from people who don't vote, don't want to vote. They feel it won't make a difference, and they're frustrated in their leaders. So we need to get them off their couches and out there voting. We had, at City Hall, we had a couple councillors, one who was elected with 16% of the vote. So that means more people in her riding, in her ward, didn't want her elected. They wanted someone else. So when you don't see a person that you wanted represented years and years and years, the same person is in. I ran on term limits. That is That I did that as a principled stance to level the playing field and give everyone a chance. So get in, try and do a good job, and get out. Because the edge of incumbency is huge. And so we need, if we want, Toronto City Hall does not, the council chamber does not reflect Toronto. If we want more diversity, more youth, and more women running for office, we need to level that playing field with concepts like term limits. And proportional representation is something the Liberals would look at. We are going to create what's called a civics assembly, where we have experts in the field, residents, activists, anyone interested to come down and let's overhaul the voting system and see how we can do better. We're also looking at lowering the voting age to 16, which, 16-year-olds have skin in the game, they pay taxes, they drive cars, and their lived experience is much different than ours. We're hearing about housing crisis with different age groups here tonight. They have a right to have their voices heard. Their voices matter. Thank you.
So one of the reasons why I joined the Ontario Greens when I looked at their platform was their strong stand in support of proportional representation, because our current system is incredibly skewed, where 30% of the vote gives you 100% of the power, and leads to all these false majority governments with a false mandate, really, to do whatever they want to. And that is extremely dangerous for democracy. It's extremely corrosive for trust in our democracy. When we have conversations at the doors, so many people feel disenfranchised, disillusioned, and disempowered because they feel like their vote doesn't count. And so a conservative vote, for example, in an urban riding, or a rural vote in a progressive riding, it doesn't count in our current system. And that's not right. I disagree with conservative policies and politics, but I still think their vote should count, just as a progressive vote should count in rural ridings. And that's why we need proportional representation, to level the playing field there and make sure that every single person's vote counts. And what that leads to is a more fair government, because every single person here's point of view is represented in that parliament or in that provincial legislature. And that leads to better government, that leads to nonpartisan government, where parties actually are forced to work with each other now and be less partisan, because the next time, in the next election, you still have to work with the same people. And that is what we need right now. We need more cooperation and collaboration in politics. We don't need the hyper-partisanship that we see currently. And proportional representation will do exactly that. We see that play out in Germany. We see that play out in New Zealand. Those are democracies where, collaborative politics is center stage. And that leads to healthier and better democracies. Thank you so much.
When I hear someone say that the first past the post system that we currently have here in Ontario works well and we shouldn't tinker with these things, it concerns me, because what has happened over the last 4 years is that under a majority Doug Ford government, where fewer than 50% of people voted for him, we've had over 13,000 Ontarians die. We have lost 4,500 people who are living in long-term care homes. If that doesn't convince us as a province that we need electoral reform and we need a better way of choosing those who lead us, I truly don't think anything ever will. So the Ontario NDP, we believe in a mixed member proportional representation. This is old news, to be fair. This was actually recommended 15 years ago, back in 2007 under a Liberal government by an independent panel, and the Liberals chose not to do this. We know that a ranked ballot, according to Fair Vote Ontario and Fair Vote Canada, would actually result in fewer women and fewer people of color represented in our political system. And as a young woman who is up against the edge of incumbency, because of course we are running an incumbent here in Beaches East York, someone who was a city councillor for 2 terms. It's also very important to be able to have new voices and new faces that are coming in to bring new ideas and new backgrounds, so that we're making sure that we are having people who are elected to represent us who understand the needs of the communities, the changing needs of our province, and that we are getting appropriate representation at Queen's Park. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much to our candidates. Also from questions submitted to the Beach Metro from Maureen Clohessy, talking about seniors. And I see some seniors here with us tonight, and there are a lot of seniors who live in this riding. Maureen's question is about helping low-income seniors specifically. We heard some comments earlier about helping seniors age in place and models of delivery service. The question is, what would you do to ensure adequate funding for essential service like PSWs or home care for low-income seniors? To the NDP to start.
Thank you so much for that question. So absolutely, what we've seen over the last 4 years is an absolute disrespect by the Ford government against the seniors in Ontario. We have seen this with the incredible loss in the long-term care sector in which I work. I have seen it also in the trauma experienced by colleagues, by family care partners. We simply cannot go on like this, and we need a change. In Canada right now, our recent Statistics Canada data coming out in 2021 have shown us that we have far more seniors now than we do people under the age of 15. Centenarians are the second fastest growing group here in Canada, and people are able to live longer because of incredible public health care that is able to prolong their lives and make sure that they live good, high quality lives with dignity. Of course, many seniors are living on restricted income. We know this is a huge issue. So there are a number of things that we will do. First and foremost, what we've seen through the pandemic is that when it comes to home care, because we are not funding the system properly, and for example, PSWs can make much more money in long-term care than they can working in home care, we see sort of a bidding system where people are signing up to come in to help someone, but they can get a little bit more at another home, so then the senior loses out on care entirely. So what we need to do is, first of all, we need to make sure we're properly funding the system. We need to make sure that we are raising the wages for all PSWs and that there is equity within the system. I was actually invited to be the Ontario NDP representative at a town hall a few weeks ago on seniors issues. So out of the 124 of us, I was up there trying to do my best to represent my other colleagues across the province. And that was a key concern that PSWs were bringing to us, the inequity in the system. And of course, if you don't have enough PSWs to work in the home care system, we simply don't have enough folks to care for our seniors. We also know, of course, that there are so many out-of-pocket expenses that seniors have. 2 key ones that the NDP is committed to creating universal care systems to address are pharmacare and dental care. We know that so many seniors show up at our emergency rooms because of tooth pain. We are all hearing stories, aren't we, about how our ERs are overrun, and a physician simply doesn't have the training beyond potentially prescribing a painkiller. They don't have dental training, I'm assuming most of them, so they're not actually able to provide the care they need. So we would create a universal, working with our federal colleagues, to create a universal dental care system so that everyone can have access to good dental care. Having worked clinically for many years, I know that actually our dental hygiene and our dental health is closely related to our brain health as we age. And not getting care for our dental issues is actually a risk factor for dementia. So from a health economics perspective, it's very important for us to ensure that all seniors, regardless of income, and in particular those seniors who may have a lower income and higher needs, have access to universal dental care. We also know that pharmacare is a huge issue, in particular for low-income seniors. Many seniors will skip a pill, or they'll take half a pill, or they'll try and wait it out so that, they'll just wait till their pain gets too bad to take their next round of medication because it's just too expensive. So once again, the Ontario NDP wants to ensure that all seniors, in particular those of lower incomes, have access to universal pharmacare so that they're not having to choose between finances and their own health. We also have plans in place for supporting more seniors, in particular low-income seniors, in affordable housing, right? Everyone wants to remain at home. We know this from research that's been done here in Toronto. We have to make sure that seniors are able to remain in place regardless if they are homeowners or if they are renters. Thank you.
So I think throughout the pandemic, we saw there's a deep sense of disrespect for our elders in this country, and it comes from the choices that the governments of this country make. And they have made not just now, but for decades. And that disrespect blew up in our faces with horrific results during the pandemic. And that entire thing can never happen again because it is such a shameful chapter in this country's history when the armed forces had to go in to make sure that our seniors were taken care of. And conversations I've had at the doors with so many of our elders who said that, they would never choose to go to a long-term care system. And that's fair. Who would, right? After watching those images. So what we need to do, firstly, is make sure that our long-term care system itself is safe. And the best way to do that is to bring it back within the public domain. We need a phased-out approach to make sure that the home care system and the public and the long-term care system is completely under the provincial government's care, and the Ontario Greens support that plan. We also, as I mentioned earlier, we need to have options to age in place. Home care is such a valuable approach to healthcare because it is a community healthcare based system, which is based on a preventative model of healthcare, right? So when you invest in community clinics, when you invest in nurse practitioner clinics or home care, you're leading to better health outcomes because the intervention is happening at an earlier time. So that means those, the problem is stopped from turning into a crisis. And not only does it cause better health outcomes, it also saves the healthcare system a ton of money, which you can then use to reinvest back into the healthcare system, especially into the people, by giving nurses, by giving PSWs a just compensation. And obviously, we also need to repeal Bill 124 while we're on the topic of nurses. In terms of how do we go about doing that is increasing funding to home care agencies that currently exist, and also creating public service agencies. And I think, universal basic income, I keep coming back to this, but it is an important tool. It's not the silver bullet, but it is an important tool in supporting our lower income seniors, and those on disability even more so, which is why, exactly as I mentioned earlier, we want to double ODSP immediately because people are literally choosing medical assisted dying rather than living currently on ODSP, which is $1,169. No one can live on that. And so we absolutely need to expand our social security net. COVID has only told us that we need a government where no one gets left behind. Not a single Ontarian, not a single Canadian. And that's why OHIP needs to expand into mental health care supports, pharmacare supports, dental care supports, vision care supports, and that's why the Ontario Greens are advocating for including the first thing that we're going to include is mental health care supports, and then expand the other services, because obviously we've all been, collectively traumatized by the pandemic, and we need those supports in place right now. And all you need to have is an OHIP card to be able to do that. And again, I think it goes back to creating a culture in government where we respect our elders. Indigenous peoples that lived on this land had that culture in place, and if we look to their societies and their cultures, or even other cultures across the world, elders are put at the very top of the list because they bring wisdom, they bring culture down to the next generation. They build connections between generations, and that kind of respect is absolutely necessary in government, in all levels of government. Thank you so much.
Thank you. When I lived in Japan over 30 years ago, no one treated their seniors the way we do. There was respect, there was intergenerational living, and there was caring. And our seniors have been, our most vulnerable population has been hardest hit in this pandemic, and it's got to stop. And it was done under the current regime at City Hall. Sorry, at Queen's Park. And so the Liberals are proposing ending for-profit long-term care. We're not going to warehouse our seniors anymore. We want people to be able to stay in their homes, and we've talked about the options for that with the secondary suites, laneway suites, garden homes. Home sharing is a great concept, partnering students looking for affordable housing up with seniors, where the students also, it helps with mitigate isolation, and the students do end up doing some chores each month for the senior who is unable to, possibly because of mobility issues and whatnot. We're going to repeal Bill 124 that is long overdue. We're going to make sure that there's access to doctors and nurses within 24 hours, raise personal support worker base pay to $25, and introduce a home care guarantee. 400,000 seniors will have access to home care in the next 4 years, and we will build 30,000 new long-term care spaces by 2028. And the thing about these long-term care, what we've learned, is not only build them, keep them public, but also monitor them, make sure the checks and balances are there so that seniors are being treated with dignity. And that concept is not going to be warehouses. It's going to be a model, European model that it already exists, that is based on community-based homes, so more of a village-type area. We will redevelop and modernize 28,000 existing spaces. Again, and we will hire mental health professionals to help with the struggles that people are going through right now. And we will also increase the old age pension to $1,000 a year for those living below a specific income threshold. So we want, seniors built Ontario, and we owe them a great deal of gratitude to make this, because they help make this province a better place, and we want them to age in their homes with dignity. That's the least we can do.
I'd like to support and endorse the opinions of our NDP and Liberal candidates that we should respect our elders. I'm an elder, vote me. I also would like to thank our NDP representative for pointing out the problems with our new trend to assisted dying, euthanasia. This is appalling. What we're ending up doing, or what we're risking doing, is ending poverty by killing the poor, ending mental illness by killing the mentally ill. We're getting very close to that. We should all be horrified by that. We should recoil from that and end it by whatever means necessary. In terms of the elderly, we're obviously going to have to raise our funding because of the inflation. There's no question of that, and I think we all agree on that. The primary concern for old fogies like myself is, of course, health care, long-term care, and home care, at-home care. And that means we need more health professionals. Craziest thing is that we've been firing health professionals right and left because of the vaccine mandates. This is not a great idea in the middle of a pandemic. We've got to rehire them. It's not following science to insist that health professionals are not qualified to make their own health decisions about whether they should be vaccinated. If anybody knows, they know. So we should be listening to them, not firing them. We should rehire them all. We have known since last September that vaccines don't prevent people from getting COVID. So anybody who's vaccinated could be a carrier. So there's no reason to keep the elderly segregated from healthcare professionals. We just have to make sure that the elderly have been fully vaccinated so that they do not, if they catch it, which we all will if we haven't yet, they do not have severe symptoms. Okay, but there are only two possibilities with vaccines. Either they work or they don't. If they work, you're vaccinated, you're safe. You don't need to demand other people be vaccinated. That's their business. If they don't work, then you have no reason to demand other people should be vaccinated. That's their business. So New Blue wants an end to all vaccine mandates. They made sense. To be fair, they made sense a year ago. They have not made sense in September because the science has gone beyond that. We know that we can't reach herd immunity with vaccines. And they are also violations probably of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is worth being very concerned about. Okay, there are other steps we can take to ease the shortage of workers in healthcare and in long-term care and in home care, which we should. Okay, there are many dedicated and well-trained nurses and medical technicians in the Philippines. I know this personally because they saved my life about 6 years ago when I had encephalomyelitis. They thought I would die. And they speak very good English, and this was back in Saudi Arabia, but I'll tell you, they all wanted to come to Canada. So we really should be recruiting. And a bigger problem than recruiting is we need to, again, deregulate so that when we bring immigrants in, not just healthcare professionals, but immigrants in general, we don't prevent them from earning a living. There are all of these restrictions and not recognizing foreign credentials that prevents newcomers from earning a living in their skills. And many immigrants will have this complaint and tell me about this. So we've got to get rid of the red tape and the arbitrary restrictions on foreign professionals. What we have in effect, it's a cartel and restraint of trade, and we all suffer. Okay? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And candidates and audience, we are in the final stretch here. So I'm going to turn it over to the candidates for your last best shot, perhaps, your fastball right over the plate for votes on Thursday. But I'm going to ask you to be fairly brief, but I'm also going to ask you to work into that this. We have seen division, we have seen rancor increase in our political system. I tuned into a basketball game last night, and it was just wall-to-wall attack ads against all parties. So as you make your best pitch for votes, please also tell us what you will do to lower the partisan temperature. And Stephen, back to you.
Okay, well, again, critical theory is largely responsible for that partisanship. It's trying to split us into tribes and warring tribes. We should all be Ontarians together. There's the story of the Good Samaritan. Your neighbor, your community, is other good people, and it doesn't matter whether they are Samaritans or Jews or Gentiles or what color their skin is, for heaven's sakes. We've got to get past that and love one another and help one another again. We've lost that. Okay. I'd like to thank, for my concluding remarks beyond that, I'd like to thank the organizers for doing this. It's an act of good citizenship, neighborliness, and community, just the sort of thing we need. And I'd like to thank all of you who've cared enough to come here in the same way. We're working together to build a better Ontario. And let's remember, we are all Ontarians, and we are working together. We're not our tribes. We're not when we say community, we should mean Ontario. We should not mean this community of a particular ethnic or particular sexual preference or whatever, or sex. We are all brothers and sisters together. I would like to apologize for the issues we have not been able to cover, Please pick up some of our literature from Sharon here in the front row if you want to hear more about New Blue. You can get in touch with me directly if you have any concerns you'd like us to raise or discuss. You can see us on the internet at newblueontario.com, newblueontario.com. Among the other issues we haven't spoken about is we want to end the COVID, well, we mentioned the COVID mandates. We want to make it harder for governments to grab emergency powers. It's been done frivolously and recklessly recently. It must become harder because now we have the precedent. And the Doug Ford government has actually passed Bill 100, which allows them to arbitrarily declare an emergency whenever they want, and they could declare a picket line illegal. And this is just government whim. They could declare an environmental protest illegal. And I don't know why the NDP and the Greens are not yelling about this. We should all be yelling about this, okay? We want to end government control over the media because the government has bought the media, and both federal and provincial. New Blue will claw back the huge government subsidies and taxes to
Okay, Stephen, you just want to wrap up?
I'm sorry, okay.
My turn.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. So my track record in everything I've done is just getting things done and working across party lines, working with everyone. I don't care where the good ideas come from as long as they come, and let's make them happen. I also believe in positive politics. I'm an eternal optimist, and people need to see that. They need to see. People want to have hope. There's a lot of despair out there, so they want elected officials whom they can trust and who believe in positivity to work well with others. I have spent my life fighting for our community and our planet. As a parent, as a neighbor, as a tenacious volunteer, community leader, and Toronto City Councillor. This is a critical time. We can't go back, and we can't have 4 of the same years. We need change. And it's a critical time for our planet and our communities. And I am asking for your support so that I can continue to fight for you as your local Beaches East York Member of Provincial Parliament. I have a solid track record of getting things done. On June 2nd, 2022, vote Mary Margaret McMahon.
So I think I answered this question earlier when I was talking about proportional representation. And I think if you look at the countries that do have proportional representation, why do they have fewer extremist movements? Is because essentially proportional representation acts as a way for society to let off the steam. The kettle pot that is like bubbling right now is because people don't feel represented. They don't feel like their voice matters. They don't feel like their voice is being heard in the halls of power of this country and this province. And that is why we need proportional representation, because it will do exactly that. It will let off the steam. It will let people have their voice and their issues heard in our governments. And that will lead to a more cooperative society and a more cooperative politics in Ontario and Canada. So as your Ontario Greens MPP for Beaches East York, I would absolutely support proportional representation and introduce legislation and work with all parties to be able to bring that forward here in Ontario. And in terms of my parting words, I just want to say, it's been such an honor to speak in front of all of you and with my esteemed colleagues, and to be here in one of the few countries where a 14-year-old can arrive and can arrive upon its shores, and in the span of 2 decades, basically stand to represent the people of this province from one of the most beautiful and welcoming communities in this city. This riding, I've spoken across the length and breadth of it. I've been canvassing since last April, knocking on doors. I don't know if I've met any of you at the doors. If I had, please come and say hello again. But this riding is green. The conversation of that doors has confirmed that for me, because the values that people share in this riding align perfectly with our party. So, and one of the things that is corrosive about our current electoral system is that concept of strategic voting, right? that we have to vote a certain way to not let the other party that we don't want win. But in this riding, you don't have to worry about that because it has a history of just electing progressive representatives. So basically, you can vote for whoever you want. And as your Green MPP, I would obviously work with all parties to make sure that we build a progressive government. A minority government is good for Ontario. And with enough Greens in there, we can absolutely achieve so many things and work with other parties to push for things that you want. Every single vote also helps and is never a wasted vote because it gives that party $2, about $2 in per vote subsidy funding every single year. So your one vote in the span of a 4-year government would give us about $8 in per vote subsidy funding. So it's not a wasted vote. And remember, no one owns your vote. Every single one of us has to earn and work hard to earn your vote. So if you want green, vote green. Thank you so much.
I love living in Beaches East York. I have been very blessed to have grown and taken part of our beautiful and supportive community. My campaign manager comes from the West End and says, you know, what better way to spend the day than walking up and down these beautiful streets, especially in the springtime, walking by the boardwalk. I'm a very passionate and energetic person, and I know I'm not afraid of hard work. Through my own education, my work experience, and my advocacy, I know I can work well and connect with others. I also know that Doug Ford really likes my ideas. Because during COVID-19, I gave him a lot of great ideas. Working together with other NDP MPPs, we successfully pushed him to prioritize childcare workers for vaccination access. We successfully pushed him to reopen playgrounds when he closed playgrounds last spring. And most importantly, we successfully encouraged him to finally release the massive stockpile of rapid tests that the federal government had purchased for all Ontarians with our taxes. So when we talk about working well at Queen's Park, I already know that Doug Ford and his MPPs like my ideas. I would have no problem helping them learn lots of other really good ideas that we can use to help improve and benefit our community and to help maintain the health and safety of not only the community members here in Beaches East York, but of all Ontarians. I'm really excited to bring my experience, my commitment, and my passion to represent our community and to support our riding. So on June 2nd, vote for me, Kate Dupuis, your NDP candidate in Beaches East York. I'm ready. Thank you.
Well, a big thank you tonight to you for coming out, to our candidates, to Beach Metro, to Balmy Beach Residents Association and Center 55. Please remember, if you have not voted in an advance poll, Thursday is the election. Make sure to vote. Thank you again for coming, and thank you, candidates.